Welcome to the underground version of the Open Circle. My name is Michael McMahon, and I'm going to talk to you today about autism and Asperger's, and through personal stories in my life and in my work for the last 45 years. The title of the presentation is Be Yourself, Everyone Else is Taken. And we're going to be referring to this little chart here, which I'm sure they're going to put online for you so you can see it. And this is my notes for you. And if we were doing this in person, you would be able to follow each one. And I'm going to start at the top there. Start here. And just say welcome. And what's that first little figure there? That's the back of the Statue of Liberty. Because I grew up in New Jersey, and we see the back of the Statue of Liberty. And the second one there, I grew up in a family, that's me in the middle, the M, and I'm going to just refer to this, and he will work the chart for you. With all those things around me are alcoholism, autism, mental illness, learning disabilities, sexual abuse, and the Catholic Church had a lot of influence, positive and negative, in our lives. So I'm the youngest of 9 children. I have one younger sister. I'm the youngest boy, I should say. And I have Asperger's. And I was diagnosed about 15 years ago by my staff. In my family, all of these problems were throughout it, and I had no clue that this was all going on because I'm one of the youngest. And as I'm growing up, I'm looking at this, and the 2 arrows represent that I didn't know whether I was coming or going in this family. I couldn't tell what was normal. We lived in a neighborhood the houses were built at the same time, and they were all the same pretty much. And as a little boy, I noticed all the differences. And that latest little figure is a little professor, which they commonly refer to children who have on the spectrum. Because they're very smart in some ways and very limited in other ways. They might have emotional and social difficulties like I did. And I sort of went underground so I could escape all the pain, and I didn't understand it anyway. And so this neighborhood, I noticed, okay, here's the way the Jewish people are inside their houses. This is the way the Italians are. This is the way the Protestants are, blah, blah, blah. And it was like a big research project for me as a small child. And little children don't usually think like on that level. And that was something I was capable of, and seeing all this around me and saying, there's something definitely wrong in this family. I can remember the moment when I was about 9 years old, and I sat and looking up the stairs and said, I don't belong in this family, and I'm out of here as soon as I can be. And they don't get to mess with me anymore. So it was an early awakening, and that's pretty smart for a little kid, but also the problem is I had no clue what was socially going on and how to deal with it, and I took that into my adulthood. So the next figure you're going to see on that chart, and I'm going to be all over the place in these stories because I think it's the best way for you to understand autism, Asperger's, and learning differences, because you can go online and get a course on it. But this really makes it real for you. So that little sandwich and that glass of lemonade, or it's a peanut butter sandwich, maybe, and it was my way of finding out about my sexual abuse as a child. And being an Aspie kid who was very much a loner in his own world, playing with my little Matchbox cars, my second cousin sort of came in, and he came into my life for a couple weeks, and he started playing with my special interest with me and getting into my world. And he paired that with touching me, so that, because normally kids on the spectrum are a little, they're not receptive to touch, and they don't really want it, and they sure shy away from it. By the way, this whole coronavirus thing is like a gift to people on the spectrum. Like we don't want to be touched by anyone. We don't want to talk to anyone. We don't want to spend time with anyone. We would rather do 24 hours a day in our special interests and for a month or two. And we don't see a problem with that like other people would. So I'm not that, into myself now like I used to be because I've learned. But that sandwich on the beach in Florida when I was, about 15 years ago, I realized that when I was eating this peanut butter sandwich, it had a little sand in it, and the lemonade was very bitter with the peanut butter in my mouth. Then I had warm potato chips with it. So you can sort of viscerally feel and taste how that would feel. And that, because I never had experienced it since I was maybe 7 years old, 6 years old, that same circumstances opened a portal for me to remember my sexual abuse all the way back through. And I want to say what's astounding about it is I didn't have heavy abuse, and I liked it, which most people won't admit. And but what's interesting about it to me is that this person did this right in the car behind my mother driving, right in her house in the bathroom when she's cooking dinner. And so I guess that says something about kids on the spectrum. If they're not trained about this stuff, I had no clue that this was bad or felt good to me for the most part. And I thought, okay, this is just normal behavior. And I didn't think anything of it. But so this is a tendency for kids on the spectrum is they're not going to be able to advocate for themselves in these kind of situations unless they're taught very clearly what to report and what not to report. If anyone asked me, did someone do this to you, I would have said yes. I could have explained the whole in detail what happened. But these kids are not going to be self-reporters. They're just going to just let it happen, and that's the real danger. So the next little picture there is a old nun in a wheelchair, and she saved my emotional life. In second grade, I had a young nun who, for somehow, spotlighted me as being a problem, and all I was doing in the back of the room with my friend Paul was I took a piece of paper and I put a line down the middle. And on my side, I drew my aircraft carriers, my planes, my helicopters. And he did the same on his side. And then we always had to have a red pencil in Catholic school to mark all your papers where you did wrong. And so we would take those and shoot, at each other's ships and put fires on each other's decks and airplane wings and stuff. She didn't think this was too cool. So she put me in the front of the room against the blackboard. My desk, and I'm a visual learner. That's why you see my notes here. This is a process that Mark Twain used, by the way, with his notes. And if I had done this system in my college classes, I would have got straight A's, but I had notes that I couldn't even decipher, and then I would just take whatever grade I got, and I never flunked, so it didn't matter. But let's see, so the nun did this to me. My mother walked in the room with my cousin who was a priest. She was head of the PTA with 8 kids in the school. It's crazy to think of nowadays. And I had to introduce my cousin, blah, blah. My mother said to me, what's happening? And, so my chair was moved back to the front aisle right in front of her so she could watch this little deviant. And then what happens at recess to all the little SB or autistic kids, they forget to go to the bathroom because they're so busy running around and doing their goofy stuff. And that was me. And we say the rosary after we come in. And I'm standing there and I have to go to the bathroom when it starts. And it's really long if you've done the rosary. And she's standing between me and the door, and I'm too scared to do anything. And I just freeze, and I have to let it loose, and it goes down my legs and into my shoes. I can still feel it to this day. And I'm standing there after everyone sat down, and she looks at me, looks down, says, go down to the basement and wait for your mother. There's a bathroom in the basement of school. So I'm in the dark in the basement, my wet pants. My mother comes. And this is typical of kids on the spectrum. I didn't cry or anything. I just told her what happened. And my mother A lot of Aspie moms and Asperger's and autistic kids' moms have a symbiotic relationship, and sometimes the fathers, with their kids, where they just understand their feelings and everything. So my mom had that kind with me, and she knew. And a couple of days later, that nun disappeared from the classroom because my mother had driven every nun, done everything for the church she could, and my father did, everything he could. And so she just disappeared, and this old nun in a wheelchair comes in and looks at me like I'm Satan's child, and she must have heard the report from the other one. And here I'm this quiet kid, I swear to God, I don't remember doing anything wrong during my childhood, maybe one little thing. And she comes in and spots me and starts to treat me like that, and then she puts my chair right in front of her desk, and she uses me as her executive functioning assistant the rest of the year to hand out the papers, and we become best friends. And she's like my grandmother that I didn't have ever. And she's just loving and kind to me and saves my emotional life for the rest of my schooling. So that's the story of that. The next one you see, my actual abuela, my grandmother, the one I knew, who, when I was a couple of years later, in 8 or so, or 9, committed suicide in our house. And that was the beginning of a lot of problems in my family. And I only tell you that because there's always a mix of people are comorbid, and what we mean by that is you have a little learning disabilities, and you might have a little emotional stuff, or you don't know, it's a chicken and the egg thing, right? And it's always, there's some anxiety disorder with kids on the spectrum almost all the time. So that exacerbated things in my family. I had sisters and brothers who were all over the spectrum. And we'll get to that. So the next one with the F is the family breakup. The family fell apart after that. Not physically, we were all there, but emotionally it was a mess. And so that guy with the big ears like mine, always stick out more, but they don't know, is brother Rodney, whose real name is Kieran Collins, who's my 7th grade teacher in school. And the reason I put him there is mentoring is so important for kids. I mean, a person can say one sentence, a teacher or a mentor to a kid, that can change their life, and they will remember it their entire life. And he said things to me that I remember. I still have a contact with him. And I told him, he's in all my books, how important he was to me. It saved me emotionally at that time in my life. So anyway, you can see that these kids on the spectrum have a hard time, forming relationships with other kids. And so my brothers and sisters had these problems. The next picture you see is a seminary. In high school, I decided to go into seminary to get out of my dysfunctional home that was just breaking down in every way. And I mean, my parents were not fighting with each other, but everyone else was falling apart emotionally because, guess what? No therapy, no nothing after grandmother commits suicide in the house. What happens with that stuff? We know now, but back then you didn't say a word. Everything was a secret. So in the seminary, I was not your typical seminarian at all. And I was a very curious child. And I found a way of breaking all the rules and justifying that. And I'll just give you an example. You guys are all adults. You can handle this. It's sort of graphic. But we all had to serve Mass 1 week each, semester or whatever. So it was my turn to serve Mass with the priest. So I had to go to the chapel early, set it all up, get everything ready, and then do the Mass with him and say the prayers with him and everything. So, unfortunately, another part of the spectrum is this conscience, this overly developed conscience. Like, people think we're amoral, but we're not. We have very deep feelings about things, and we can be, like, if we're on your team, we're going to be on your team. And so I was, like, more Catholic than the Pope, and so I had pleasured myself the night before, and I was in mortal sin. And so I had to go to the priest before Mass and say, Father, can you hear my confession? Blah, 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 blah. And then he gave me like 5 Hail Marys, which seemed to be standard fare at that time. And so I did it, and I was able to go to communion and everything else. The problem with people on the spectrum, like a normal teenager would say, screw this, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to tell him any of this stuff. So the next night, the same thing happened, and I go back in the next day, and he goes, and I say, okay, I did this, and he says, okay, say 5 Hail Marys, blah, blah, blah. And I'm relieved and saved from the fires of hell again. Oh, third night, same problem. And I go in there, and he goes, you did what? And everyone out there in the church can hear it, all the other seminarians, all their brothers, and blah, blah. And I'm really embarrassed and humiliated, but I did it. And so this is like ridiculous behavior of a normal teenager would never go back in there again. And it took me till maybe 40 to realize that and to break away from that. So the next one is a sign with Ho 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 Chi Minh. The NLF is going to win. That's me and my future wife, and that's how we formed our relationship, through special interests. That's something I could do. I got someone who agreed with the same things I did, and then we run with it. We got arrested together, blah, blah, blah. So I entered married life as a child, not knowing who the hell I was, very immature, but very, very smart in many ways, which is typical of us on the spectrum. And a lot of us on the spectrum have to work for ourselves because we can't take orders from anyone, and we have very definite plans about how we want to do things. And the woman in my life had to work with that. And I had a lot of other positive qualities that sort of made up for my crazy ones. Anyway, uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis children, every 2-3 years, another one comes. And there they are. And so and I do everything I have to do, try to do it all differently than I was raised, and it worked pretty good, actually. And the next slide says, Mas Madura que yo. And what that means is that they were more mature than me. And I walked behind them one time when they were all like in their 20s, and I looked at them and I said, how did they get more mature than me? This is crazy, I'm their father. But they are, and they still are, really, in many ways. And so that's something that is it's part of a learning difference, okay? Everyone matures in different ways, and there's a different learning profile for people on the spectrum. We have very high highs and very low lows. Most people are like this in their learning, and they have a pretty even profile. But we are like massively smart in a couple areas and very socially immature and emotionally immature in some areas. And that's something I've had to cope with and try to even it off over last 15 years when I was aware of it, right? So the next slide is called discrepancy theory and El Banco. And what that means is that I think I made this up. I don't know of anyone who talks about discrepancy theory, so I probably did. But my brother moved to Las Vegas, and I had 3 group homes, and I let him own one of them. So he said, where do I go banking? I said, go to this bank. And it was before computers. He went to the bank. I went to the bank a few days later, and the woman looks at my check and says to me, oh, you're Jim McMahon's brother. And I said, I'm thinking, what an idiot, talking about me to the thing. I've gone to this woman like for 3 or 4 years, never talked to her, didn't know her name, anything. And he comes in 1 week and is talking to her, and she knows all about my family. I was really pissed off. And it went in this file right over here, it's called the discrepancy file, for about another 15 years, 20 years. And other discrepancies were added to it before I finally took action about that discrepancy. And the way that happened is after I was diagnosed about 15 years ago, I was on a rental car van. I'm the only one with the driver who's like a 20-something hick guy in Indiana. So I say, I'm just diagnosed. I say, you got to learn how to be social, so say something to this guy. So I say, what about those Colts? The Colts were good at that time. And he's going, oh, about the Colts. I hated the Colts. I like the Patriots, but I listened to this crap for a while. And then I changed it to like art museums. And he starts telling me about this wonderful art museum of the Southwest. And I ask him about bikes, trails, and he tells me about that. These are all my special interests. And after I got off the van, I felt my feet felt lighter, and I felt really good. My self-esteem went up. I had done something that I hadn't done. Just talk to someone even without any reward for myself, sort of. And it changed the way I thought about it. Like, now you can't shut me out. And you can see by this tape. Anyway, the next one there is, what is that? That is called sensory integration, basically. And some of the things that we have to do that aren't taught to us, because we tend to be brainiacs and don't take care of our bodies, our social lives, and everything else. Sort of like Einstein syndrome. So you can envision him with his hair not taken care of, just concentrating on the nuclear stuff. Well, that's sort of the way we are. And so we, like, if you come up to shake hands, it's like you get a dead fish in your hand, and we just sort of, we're thinking about the stats of the Boston Red Sox or something in our head. So sensory integration is a way out of that for adults and young adults. Swimming, hiking, physical exercise breaks it breaks up that concreteness in your brain, that cognitive inflexibility, allows you to be present, and with other people. And so that's very important. The next one is called, this is something we teach our children, our students all the time. It's called the donkey rule, and that is a donkey, not a dog. And the donkey rule works like this. If 5 people call it a donkey and you're still calling it a horse, then don't be a jackass and do what they say. And so in other words, you want to use other people to clear the deficit in your social thinking and ask them their opinions, people you trust, and then make a decision based on their decision. That's right, that makes sense. So you don't keep making the same big mistakes over and over. The next one is a soda, but it means stop, observe, deliberate, or use the donkey rule, and take action. It's a little thing we teach our students on the spectrum so that they can get control of their behavior. They stop, they see something going on, people are not reacting to them the right way. They say, okay, what's going on here? Deliberate, what did I do? Did I say something wrong? What happened? And then think about the donkey rule. Maybe you have to, say, can I talk to you later about it? Or find out, get an answer from someone, and then take action. So this is a really important way of doing it. The other thing, the next one is called reciprocal. That's reciprocal conversation skills. Very important. The social is the glue, right? Without social, our students they could be the smartest one at their tech company or at their school or whatever, but without the social, they are just the weird guy in cubicle B who doesn't know how to talk to you at the water fountain, who doesn't go to lunch with anyone. And that is the problem, because they don't get promoted and they're smarter than most people. And this was my problem. I had to work for myself because I couldn't compete with these guys who had it all together. At least I thought I couldn't. Okay, and another slide saying sensory integration is most important. It's really important. And they won't have that at the colleges if you send your kid there. The next one is a spectrum. It's like the rainbow. It's a spectrum of colors. Well, the learning difference spectrum, the autism spectrum, is ADD, LD, Asperger's, high-functioning autism. It's a spectrum, and people are not the same. They're snowflakes, not a negative word that the Republicans use for us, but in the sense that they're all different. Everyone is different. And so I'm going to describe the next 5 are going to be my sisters and brothers. And tragically, they're all dead, and by their own hands, which is really ridiculously absurd. And so the first one is my sister, Vivian, and it's like a tornado. She had ADD, and I was a year younger than her, and I was the recipient of it. She could not keep her hands off me, hitting on me, taking my stuff, wanting my money, everything, my entire life, even as an adult. And it was not good, so, and I'm not going to tell you there are unhappy endings, but, because we don't have time, but it's very unfortunate that in my family, because all these problems, at that time, no one was diagnosed with anything, pretty much, except for mental illness. And even then, they were just given medication and sent home, or in an institution and then sent home. So my parents told us not to say anything to any neighbor or friend or school or anything. So it became very lethal inside my home, which only made it worse and kept repeating my entire life. It's just sad, sad, sad. But I'm here because I take care of myself, and that's the thing we have to teach our students, how to take care of themselves. So the next one it says Aspie. I had a brother who was the smartest person I ever known. He went to college, got out of college in 3 years, got into medical school in 3 years, and then was the valedictorian in medical school, being a year younger than everyone, and had 4 children while he was in medical school, and then became a psychiatrist. And genius is very close to insanity, and my family is an example. Very, very, very smart people with good morals, wanting to really help others, all of them. It's very, very sad. I'm not going to talk about it a lot because I start crying. And I'm writing my memoir, so I've been rewriting and rewriting for years now, so I'm coming to grips with it all. Anyway, so that little rocking chair there, this is an example of his genius and his craziness. That rocking chair is a shaker replica with no screws, no bolts, made out of mahogany that he shipped to my house from Guatemala when he was in the jungle, and showed up at my house. I didn't know when he was going to show up, and then gave me a list and goes in my garage with that wood, and after 2 weeks comes out and produces that for the birth of my daughter, who acts that way, and then disappears. So he was genius. He could do anything. He could make anything. He'd walk through the Iron Curtain before the fall of Russia, and go over the other side, hang out, and come back. He did all kinds of things like this. In some ways, I was attracted to it, but not that part of it. The next one says ASD, that's also spectrum disorder. I had a sister who was high-functioning autistic, and she managed, because my mother trained her well, to do everything for herself. She got through school with some social problems, and the thermometer's there because this is the kind of stuff she would do. She lived in this house in Florida, and in order to save money, she would not use the air conditioning. And she'd come to the door when she knew I was coming, nude. And I'd say, Mary Jo, what the hell are you doing? Put some clothes on. And I'd say, why don't you use it? Oh, it's broken. My in-law hasn't fixed it. But she didn't do it on purpose. And someone else who was hard to make relationships with anyone, but she had people that looked out for her. And I can go on about it, but I don't have enough time, so we're going to move on. The last one there is a brother, again, who was addicted to and died of alcoholism. And he didn't have any learning problems, but all the emotionality in the family and lack of understanding about these things just add up. And when you don't talk about a death like my grandmother's, it just eats at people. And he never got help and everything. Very lethal stuff. The next one says sensible, which means very sensitive in Spanish. And those are pills. And I had a brother a year ago, my favorite brother, my closest brother, who I never in my lifetime thought it would die this way, who got a hip surgery, and then he just got all these doctors giving him stuff, and it just decompensated him to the point where he gave up. And it's very sad. So why do I tell you all this? Because it says, hay muchos problemas, pero there are a lot of problems in the world, but there hay muchos soluciones. There are lots of solutions too. And in my life, I've had to concentrate on the solutions to stay normal, I have 19 grandchildren, 6 children. I live in Mexico. I am an artist. I am a gardener. I travel the world speaking. I do everything. And it's all because I keep my balance, my sensory stuff, my emotional, my social, do therapy, do whatever I have to do, men's groups, etc. So these are some of the things I do. And the last couple lines here. So first one is meditation and prayer. Okay, simply being able to sit in the morning, read some. I have ACOA. I read, which is really good, and I read a reading, meditate, calm my spirit, try to center myself so I'm not. My thoughts are not, because these kind of brains are like, I describe an Aspie brain like a nuclear power plant. If you don't cool it down, it's going to blow. And it will look like mental illness because we burn out and we act out, and little children or adults, and we look like we're having tantrums or we're mentally ill. But basically we haven't taken care of ourselves emotionally and socially and sensorily. And that's why. So if you don't cool down that nuclear power plant, it's going to blow. I also describe it like this front of here. Imagine like those wheels on a slot machine. Most people track, they're thinking about their daughter at home when they're at work or whatever. Not people on the spectrum. We're tracking, like I said, the Red Sox, if they had a game today, changes all those batting averages, right? And then you have your family, and then you have your special projects you're working on, and you have the politics, maybe religion, and these are all spinning at one time. That's why we look oblivious to people when they come up to us. And we don't, seem to be there, and we say something out of the blue. That seems really bizarre, because we're thinking about these things so deeply. It's a different learning profile, is all it is. Okay, so the next one is yoga. I find yoga to really be helpful also, and that is sensory diets, SD, sensory diets, and it's important to set one up for yourself and then do it, so that, if you're going to be in an airport, find a quiet place and stretch out, or, walk, or, do whatever. I go to the meditation chapels if I can find them, and things like that. So you got to do what you have to do to get on that plane and be able to relax. Okay, CBT is cognitive behavior therapy. It's probably the most effective thing you can do with someone on the spectrum. And this is I'll give you an example. The stories are better than anything else I can say to you. We had a Jewish student from Israel and a Muslim student from, where's he from? Pakistan. And they were best friends. But both of them had Asperger's, and both of them, one hated Jews, the Muslim, and the Jew hated Muslims. And so it was like, what? Your best friends. So in therapy, I suggested to the therapist that they might want to sort of break apart that rigid foundation of these cognitive behaviors that people have that are so rigid, And so, Tali is your best friend, is Usman. He's Muslim. You said you hate all Muslims. How can you hate all Muslims if he's your best friend? And so seems logical to the rest of us, but believe me, the whole world has this problem, not just us. And so there you go. And so I'm going to skip the other thoughts and keep going. Lo hago por mí mismo. I have to take care of myself first, right? And so the next one shows you really good foods. So I've learned to eat avocado, which I hated, the mushy, gushy avocado since I've come to Mexico 3-4 years ago. In the last 2 years, I learned to eat avocado. I forced myself as an adult to learn to eat other foods. I also, those are a dining room table with chairs, sit in a different direction at my dining room table every day. And this is for reasons to stimulate my brain in different ways. And the next one shows a road where I travel down different streets to go different places to explore. And that's also, as you get older, these are really good techniques to keep your brain, vivid and working well. And aprender español, that's a little hat there. And I'm learning it really well. It's taken me 3 years, a lot of work. Travel the world, that's the world there. And I have allowed myself, the next one is sort of like I've left my brain open to new things. I made a rule for myself. The rules you would give to a small child if I was working with a little Aspie kid or an autistic kid, I would say, here's a rule from now on. Your parents are going to introduce new things to you all the time for you to try, and you have to try it. And I get the parents to do that with the kid, and believe me, it makes a big difference way down the line. Because cognitive flexibility is the most important quality that we're trying to get these kids, and I'm a mentor of it because I do it with myself. And that's what you need to have, because they close the supermarket. You can't keep going to that door and standing there and trying to get in. It's not going to happen. You got to go find a new one. And these kids don't get it. So keeping an open mind, accepting diversity. But when I was, I'll tell you this little story, and we're going to end pretty quickly here, is that when I was first diagnosed, I went to a Benihana's with my Aspie friend, who was a professor, and he's very smart. And, we had other people on both sides of the table with us. And so I said to these guys, I'm going to use my new social skills. So I want to learn about everyone. So I ask these people what they're doing. They tell me. So then I go over to this couple here, and she says, and I say, well, what are you here for? Oh, it's our anniversary, and he's a minister, and I'm his wife, and everything. And no offense intended to any Christians here, but this is what happened. So she says, yeah, we're here, on our anniversary, and he's a minister. And I say, okay, and I start talking about my travels. I was talking about in Thailand, how I went to the temple of the reclining Buddha, and how beautiful it was. And the woman turns to me and says, well, you're only saved through the blood of Christ. And I said, and my friend Stephen is Jewish, and he's one of my best friends, and I know he's an extremely good guy. I know he's going to heaven now. So I say to her, well, this Aspie liberation statement here, it freed me of my cognitive rigidity in religion, everything, in this one statement. I said to her, there are 7 billion people on the planet. About 1.5 billion are Christian, and a billion of them are Catholics, which you probably don't think are Christians anyway. And I don't think a loving God is going to send 5.5 billion people to hell because they don't know Jesus. And she just shut up. But what happened with me was I was liberated at that moment. I said I could like everyone around me. I didn't have to have these walls. I didn't have to worry about doctrine. I didn't have to worry about any of it anymore. I just knew that there is a loving presence in the universe that loved me, and I could love other people. So I'm going to finish off with a couple of things here. That TBFL is my memoir. It's going to come out whenever it does. It's called The Best for Last. That's what I'm calling it, because God, the universe, God, has given me this amazing life here in Mexico with these beautiful children. I'm very blessed. And my motto is think positive. So I encourage you to think positive during this time that we're all going to be in our houses. Do positive things, help others, and thank you for listening, and ciao.